I'm joined now by All Rise News' Adam Klasfeld. Now, Adam, yesterday you and I spoke about a major ruling that happened in Oregon where a Trump-appointed judge blocked Trump's deployment of troops to that state. And of course, these troops were deployed to Portland. And so in light of this new ruling in Oregon, how does this impact the existing lawsuit that's happening in California? Now, just as a reminder for folks who are watching, in California, pretty much the same situation has occurred in Los Angeles. This was ultimately blocked in a trial court by Judge Breyer, and now it was appealed up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. But there is a link between what just happened in Oregon and the ongoing case in the Ninth Circuit. So, Adam, can you explain what that link is and whether what Trump just found out in Oregon is going to have some detrimental impact on the ongoing California case?
Absolutely, Brian. Right now, a federal appeals court in California is set to determine whether they're going to review and potentially even overturn a decision that gave Trump the latitude to send the troops into California. It adopted a very permissive standard that the state of California warned that hey, if you let Trump do this in California, his order for the troops was not geographically limited. It wasn't time limited. He's going to do this again. And that was an argument that they were making from the beginning. And it was an argument that troubled one judge from that circuit enough that on his own, that judge requested the briefing on whether there should be what's known as en banc review. Essentially, a review in the same court with the full bench, about a dozen judges, overruling to determine whether they should overrule what a three-judge panel found. And what this decision yesterday showed is that it kind of backs up what California was saying, that yes, Trump will use any excuse to try to deploy the military, because the judge's findings in Oregon were that essentially that Trump's declaration was untethered to the facts on the ground. I'm going to read a passage from that ruling, then I'm going to switch to a passage from California Attorney General Rob Bonta, who said that this is just what we warned about, judges, in trying to urge the Ninth Circuit to revisit their very deferential standard. So here's what a Trump appointee found in Oregon. In this case, unlike in Newsom 2, that's the name of the appeal in California, plaintiffs provide substantial evidence that the protests at the Portland ICE facility were not significantly violent or disruptive in the days or even weeks leading up to the president's directive on September 27th, 2025. The record evidence establishes that while disruption outside the Portland ICE facility peaked in June of 2025, federal and local law enforcement officers were able to quell the disorder. As of September 27th, 2025, it had been months since there was any sustained level of violent or disruptive protest activity in Portland. During that time frame, there were sporadic events, either requiring PPB monitoring or federal law enforcement intervention, but overall, the protests were small and uneventful. She concludes a little bit later, in sum, the president is certainly entitled to a great deal of deference, she says, citing the Ninth Circuit, but a great deal of deference is not equivalent to ignoring the facts on the ground. Now, that's where we turn to what Rob Bonta said, the California Attorney General, saying, we warned you that this would happen. Just last week, on September 29th, he wrote to the Ninth Circuit, urging them to revisit and overturn their earlier order, letting Trump send the troops into California. And he said that in this letter I'm reading to it from it, says that he warned that it was, quote, not limited to Los Angeles or even to California. Plaintiffs thus warned that the reasoning in this court's published June 19th stay order would invite the president and Secretary Hegseth to deploy the National Guard in other communities across this circuit in violation of 10 USC 12406, the Posse Comitatus Act, and longstanding democratic traditions. That prediction has materialized. And then he goes on to cite Trump's directive to Hegseth to provide all necessary troops to protect, quote unquote, war-ravaged Portland. So this is you get to the heart of it, and I know that I just read a great deal of text from both the ruling and Rob Bonta's response. This is Bonta saying, "We told you that if you gave any deference to Trump to send the troops into California based on the set of facts that they put in that case, they would use even weaker facts moving forward to try to use any pretext to send the military." And now they have a ruling from a federal judge saying that Portland had been quiet for weeks, if not months.
Proving out that thesis, basically, that Trump is going to use the thinnest of all pretexts to be able to deploy the troops into other cities within that federal circuit. So I guess the question here becomes, there is an ongoing case in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals where the Trump administration is fighting against this trial court judge, Judge Breyer, who obviously blocked the Trump administration's efforts to deploy the troops to engage in civilian law enforcement. That's the Posse Comitatus Act. Now that case is still pending in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, are these Ninth Circuit Court judges going to look at what just happened in Portland and say, hey, you know what? This is happening in real time. We're seeing the extent to which Donald Trump is abusing any deference we give him. And so will that have an adverse effect on that ongoing case? Is it possible that Trump could actually that he has a higher likelihood of losing that case because of what he is doing right now in Portland that shows the extent to which he's willing to abuse the judge's discretion here?
I think that's absolutely the case because, again, if you look at what Bonta was saying in that letter, he said, we warned you he would do this, and he did this. And then days later, a federal judge in Oregon says this pretext was untethered to the facts on the ground, that this was ludicrous. Portland has been quiet. She said in a very blistering opinion that even though Trump is entitled to deference under this rule by the Ninth Circuit, deference doesn't mean you can absolutely ignore the facts on the ground. That they have this ruling saying, you know what? Bonta's prediction came true.
Yeah. So with that said now, when do you expect that we'll see some movement in the Ninth Circuit? Because, and look, the reason that I'm so focused on this Ninth Circuit case, or any case, frankly, that has to do with these troop deployments, is because I know that this isn't just about being able to deploy the troops now. This is absolutely 100% about Donald Trump being able to deploy the troops as we head toward election time. Because if he has a legal framework to be able to deploy the troops because the Ninth Circuit gave him the go-ahead, or any other judge gave him the go-ahead, then he's going to use that as a legal framework to be able to send the troops in. And we've seen what happens, what Trump tries to do during the election. We've seen when he's tried to seize voting machines in Georgia, for example. We know that he's willing to do whatever it takes to allow himself or Republicans to steal these elections. And so if that means he's going to, send troops into Democratic strongholds like Philadelphia or Milwaukee or Detroit or Atlanta to seize the voting machines, or send troops in to do, crowd control for unruly crowds, or whatever he decides needs to happen, then these instances right here in September and October, June, July, August, September of 2025 are going to serve as the legal basis for him to do this in November of 2026 or November of 2028. So that's why I'm focused on this now. And so, right. So I guess the first question here is, when do we expect to have some ruling from the Ninth Circuit?
It's hard to say. They haven't put a date on the calendar. But to your point, Brian, I remember sitting through the trial for the Posse Comitatus Act. There was some remote access to that trial. And when I was listening to it, one of the first issues that came up was the order that was supposed to send the troops to California was supposed to sunset. And on right before the trial, days before the trial, the Trump administration extended that order for just enough an amount of time to keep it extended through this year's elections in November. So absolutely, the state of California is thinking of the very issue that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that even before the Ninth Circuit resolves this question of whether they're going to overturn the ruling in an en banc review, we're going to see this case play out in Oregon because this is a 14-day temporary restraining order. Before the end of it, there will be more proceedings, and that might actually transpire more quickly. And it's going to call attention to the weakness of Trump's entire framework for this. It might put wind in the sails of any legal challenges coming out of Illinois with everything going on in Chicago. Right now, you have, as we said in our last conversation, one of the most favorable draws Trump could have hoped for, one of his own appointees, saying that the type of deference that presidents get over their calls regarding the military doesn't extend to ignoring every fact on the ground. And the existence of that precedent, the existence of the pushback from the state of California to try to overrule the precedent in the Ninth Circuit shows, at least on small levels, a pushback against this unprecedented use of presidential power to send the troops on the streets and through Election Day.
You know, Adam, these cases that are happening in California and in Oregon are very analogous. They're not identical, but they're analogous. And so is there a world in which, as both of these merge into the Ninth Circuit, because both fall within the Ninth Circuit's jurisdiction when they get appealed out of the trial court, as they both merge onto the Ninth Circuit, is there a way for the cases to merge, or are they going to be taken unto themselves with their own facts, and one has nothing to do with the other as far as those respective cases are concerned?
We'll see what happens. I mean, there have been a number of cases in birthright citizenship, one in that are being challenged in different places in the same circuit, and they've sometimes played out in parallel. I think it's very possible we'll see different circuits weigh in if there's a legal challenge in Chicago. I think what this legal victory for the state of Oregon will do is that it will turbocharge the existing battles. It is showing this is a live issue. It requires urgent adjudication because it's happening right now. That the law needs to be clarified. So whether that's treated in parallel or if it happens at the same time, I think the existence of multiple legal battles will just increase the urgency of resolving that question.
Finally, let's finish off with this. I know that the judges are supposed to look at each case unto itself, right? They're not supposed to look at the broader environment or downstream effects of something. Every case is taken unto itself with its own facts, and that's it. But knowing what we know about how Trump is going to abuse any legal win that he gets as we head toward election time, and knowing how he has a proclivity to try and rig election results in his favor and his party's favor, do you think that is in the mind of these judges at all as they're offering up these rulings that will determine whether or not Trump has a future legal framework to be able to deploy these troops? So like if you and I and everybody watching right now can see plain as day that Trump is going to use all of this as his legal framework in November of 2026 or November of 2028, surely a federal judge can deduce the same thing. They have the same access to to the news and the internet that the rest of us do. They were all around on January 6, 2021. They know all of this stuff. So do you think that kind of falls into their mindset a little bit in terms of how they're ruling on this, knowing full well that their ruling on this specific case is also going to serve as the legal framework that he's going to use when he does try to, interfere in the election come 26 or 28?
Well, judges absolutely can take judicial notice of the fact that Trump extended his troop deployment order with just enough time that it extends through the election. Yeah. They understand that carries its own set of problems.
Right.
So I think that absolutely, yes, they will be aware of the fact that this is falling within the backdrop of someone who tried to overturn the 2020 election, the fact that this is happening, the fact that troop deployment will take place during an election season could chill people from going to the polls. That's something that can and should be on the minds of the judges, regardless of the 2020 election, that you don't want troops on the streets with gratuitously in a civilian city during an election. And that is something that I'm sure the state of California, because they brought it up in the lower courts, are going to bring it up in the appellate courts. And yes, the election factor will be a part of the mix here, okay, even if the judges aren't strictly, placing this in the post-2020 election context, post-January 6th context. They are aware, because it is just a plain fact that the troop deployment, at least in the state of California, was designed in such a way that it just extends past the election. The judges will have to grapple with that.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously, for all of the reasons that we just explained, as we head toward the election, this is especially important. And it's important now, because I don't want to ever fall into the trap of normalizing this idea that we should have federal troops marching in our city's streets just because Donald Trump has decided that if he does it over and over and over again, that this is somehow our new reality in the United States. So, Adam, you have done a stellar job in reporting on this. Highly recommend for anybody who is watching, if you'd like to not only follow Adam's excellent reporting, but support him and support independent media, please subscribe to his outlet, which is called All Rise News. I'm going to put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. You can also go to allrisenews.com. Highly recommend. And Adam, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Brian.